And of course the Palestinians, backed by the Arab Muslim states, want a Palestinian state with its capital in the eastern part of Jerusalem. Palestinian Authority leader Mahmoud Abbas has declared one day a young Palestinian will raise the Palestinian flag over Jerusalem, the eternal capital of the state of Palestine. So is it the capital of Israel or is it the capital of Palestine? That's one of the issues which is before the nations today. And it speaks about Jerusalem again as the burdensome stone. In 1993, the Oslo Accords were signed between the Israeli government and the Palestine Liberation Organization. Here you have a photograph of President Clinton and Yitzhak Rabin, the Prime Minister then of Israel, assassinated just a couple of years later, and Yasser Arafat, the leader of the Palestine Liberation Organization. The Oslo Accords made what was called the Declaration of Principles on Interim Self-Government Arrangements, that the Palestinians should have a government which would start first in Gaza and Jericho, and would be the first step in a final settlement, in which at the final settlement they would deal with such issues as the status of Jerusalem. It broke down 7 years later when Arafat refused an offer from the then Prime Minister of Israel, Ehud Barak, which would have given actually much of what the Palestinians want, half of the old city of Jerusalem and a Palestinian state with the old city of Jerusalem as its capital. Arafat said that he couldn't give up even 1 inch of the old city of Jerusalem, and he said that anyone who would not keep the whole of Jerusalem is not an Arab and not a Muslim. And instead of accepting the offer, he then launched what became the Second Intifada. There's a famous foreign minister of Israel, a man called Abba Eban, who once said, "The Palestinians never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity." Well, they did on that occasion. And it led to the Second Intifada, which was the uprising of the Arabs against Israel, Palestinian uprising, which brought terror to the Israelis, terrorist attacks, bombs on buses, bombing civilian areas, 1,137 Israelis killed in terror attacks, around 3,000 Arabs killed in response from the Israeli government. And to stop this, Israel actually put up what was known as the security barrier, or the wall, or the fence, which is one of the main things which is used now against Israel as in propaganda against Israel. But remember, that was the reason why it went up, because of the terror which was launched against Israel at that time. Despite this, the world has continued to work for what they call the two-state solution, which is the proposal to solve the Arab-Israeli conflict in what is called two states for two groups of people. The two-state solution envisages an independent state of Palestine there from the West Bank and Gaza, alongside the state of Israel and to the west of the Jordan River. The boundary between the states has never been fixed, although the Palestinians say that they want all of it. Israel has said that they can't have all of it, for reasons which we'll see in a moment. But there is ongoing negotiations on this subject. What's interesting, again, from the point of view of Bible prophecy, which says that Jerusalem is going to be a burdensome stone burdening all nations, is that this subject has been the issue on the agenda of the United Nations, which has passed more resolutions on this subject than almost all of the other conflicts in the world to the present time. The UN, the US, the European Union and Russia made up what they call the Quartet, which is the four groups of nations who've been working to resolve the Arab-Israeli conflict. How many nations are involved in the UN, the US, the European Union and Russia? Well, actually all the nations of the world. But you've got also the most powerful nations in the world coming together to try to resolve this question. And you've had the Obama administration under its during the time of President Obama, trying to resolve it with its with Kerry going to hold the agreement, which didn't actually come to anything. In January 2017, France organised a conference involving 70 nations of the world to try to resolve it. Israel wasn't invited. Russia's offered to host talks, and now President Trump says he wants to cut a deal. But it's amazing that all of these great nations have been trying to resolve this area, which is a very small area in fact, but trying to resolve this particular question. Mr. Netanyahu has said that one of the things which he would like the Palestinian, which he insists actually that the Palestinian Authority do, is to recognize Israel as a Jewish state. They've said, well, we recognize that Israel exists, but we're not going to recognize Israel as a Jewish state. So what's the significance about recognizing Israel as a Jewish state? It means accepting that Israel has a right to exist as a Jewish state. And it means also the end of the conflict. It means that it's the final demand, if you like. They won't take it any further. And they continually refuse to do this. The clue to why this is actually in their emblem. This is the emblem of the PLO, of the Fatah, which is the political wing of the Palestine Liberation Organization. You can see here the guns, and that's part of the program to how to get control of the territory. And you can see that this is the map. Now, which country, what's that map show you? All of Israel from the Jordan to the sea. If you go to any anti-Israel demonstrations in London, which take place quite regularly, we go to some not to take part in them, but to stand with Israel on the other side, you'll find one of the chants which people say all the time is, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. If Palestine will be free from the river to the sea, what does that mean? It means the end of the state of Israel. Everything from the Jordan to the Mediterranean must be part of Palestine. And the Palestine Liberation Organization has its charter, which is the Palestine National Covenant, which says that the establishment of the State of Israel is illegal. It says claims of historical or religious ties of Jews to Palestine are incompatible with the facts of history and the true conception of what constitutes statehood. Judaism being a religion, not an independent nationality. It denies any connection between the Jews and Israel, and denies that they have a right to be there. It actually calls for the elimination of Israel by armed struggle, and it says that this decree cannot be changed except with a 2/3 majority. Now, the Palestine Authority says that it has been changed. Israel disputes that they've actually had a formal change of it, and to this day you'll find that in Palestinian propaganda, not propaganda, in news, if you like, what they put out to their children, what they put out in the education system, in the media, consistently actually calls for the whole of from the river to the sea to be part of Palestine. Calls Haifa a Palestinian port. It calls Acre and Jaffa Palestinian cities. It calls the whole area of Jerusalem actually part of Palestine. And it continually indoctrinates its children that the program ultimately is to replace Israel with a Palestinian state from the river to the sea. That's why Netanyahu insists that if they're going to make peace, they've got to accept the Jewish state of Israel. And that's what they so far refuse to do so. Israel also, of course, has concerns about its security. Here you have the distances from the West Bank. As I say, this is quite a small area. 11 miles from the West Bank here to Jaffa. Actually 9 miles from there. That place, Kfar Saba, I've been to Kfar Saba. There's a very good Messianic congregation there, led by Brother Tony Sperandeo. I've been there and stood on the roof of their building, and you can see from there into Qalqilia, just about half a mile away. Qalqilia, which is an Arab town just across the border. Also been up from here to a town called Alfei Menashe, which is just across the Green Line in the area of the West Bank, which is a Jewish settlement. And from Alfei Menashe you have a magnificent view right across the whole of the coastal strip. You can see from more or less up here to Netanya, down to Ashdod. You can see the whole of Tel Aviv. You can see all of the populated area down below. It's a good place to take a photograph of the coastal strip of Israel from. But it's also a high place looking down over a valley. If you are militarily, you've got a high place looking over a valley where you've got a whole lot of people, you've got a bit of an advantage over them, haven't you? And for this reason, Israel doesn't want to have these areas in the hands of a hostile force which could then use them to bombard their cities down below. Recently Netanyahu also said that he insists that Israel will have a control over this border here, the border along the Jordan Valley between the West Bank and the city and the country of Jordan. Again, something which the Palestinians actually do not want to happen. One of the reasons why Israel doesn't want to make an unconditional withdrawal from these territories is because of this place, Gaza. They have experience of what happens. In 2005, Israel uprooted the Jewish settlers who lived in Gaza, handed over the farms which they had to the Arabs. Within a few weeks they were trashed and turned into terrorist bases. In 2007, Hamas fought a battle with Fatah, which was the supposedly more moderate faction of the Arab movement. Hamas, the Islamic fundamentalist group, defeated Fatah, took control of the area of Gaza, and Hamas consistently rejects any concept of a peace process with Israel. They have a constitution which is based on the Islamic view, and it says its Islamic duty is to destroy Israel. Hamas is still really in a state of war with Fatah, the other faction in the Palestinian Authority. And the reason why Israel particularly doesn't want to hand over the West Bank unconditionally to the Arabs is because of what happened from Gaza, which is that missiles have been fired into Israel from Gaza, reaching right up here to almost the borders of Tel Aviv, and in fact some of them have almost reached Tel Aviv. So they have used the territory to fire missiles into Israel, which has caused conflicts in 2008, 2012, 2014. Generally, our media portrays Israel as the aggressor in these conflicts and shows you pictures of Arab towns and houses being smashed to the ground, and compares the number of casualties amongst the Arabs, which is much higher than the number of casualties amongst the Jewish people. One of the reasons for that is because the Hamas has put its rockets in populated areas, next to hospitals, next to schools, next to homes, and when Israel takes those missiles out, takes those places out with its missiles, then naturally civilians are caught up with it, and many of them are injured and many die. Not Israel's desire, but what happens. And you have to ask yourself, what would any government do if a neighbouring country was firing missiles into their territory? I once remember seeing a report in which Tzipi Livni, who was then the foreign minister of Israel, was being interviewed by a very uppity BBC reporter who was really blaming Israel for responding to all these rockets, and the BBC reporter said, how many rockets would you accept, how many rockets would be acceptable coming from Gaza into Israel? And she said, none! Which country would accept missiles coming from its territory into their territory? And the BBC reporter, I think, perhaps got the point, but it just seemed to me part of the anti-Israel spirit that they're supposed to accept being bombarded from someone else's territory and do nothing about it. Well, they have done something about it, and unfortunately people have suffered and died on both sides. More people have died from the Arab side because they don't protect their people, they put them in the way. Israel makes protection for its own people and finds places where they can be protected. Well, the other issue, which is a major issue, is the issue of the Jewish settlements. This map shows you some of the Israeli settlements in the West Bank. After the Six-Day War, Israel actually offered to return the territories in return for peace, security and negotiations with the Arabs. They sent back the three no's: no peace, no security, no negotiations. And from that point Israel said, okay, well, we'll stay in the land, we'll stay in the area, and until they decide to make peace with us, we'll settle it. First of all, mainly with military places, but then with Jewish homes, often in areas of biblical significance. And if you study your Bible, you'll find that most of the places you know from the Bible are not in the coastal strip, they're in this area. You don't find out much about Tel Aviv or Haifa in the Bible. You hear a lot, of course, about Jerusalem, which is at the heart of the thing. You hear about Hebron, which is down here. Shechem, which is Nablus, which is somewhere up here, Bethlehem, which is somewhere down here, Jericho. Most of the places you know from the Bible are actually in the West Bank or Judea and Samaria, as Jewish people prefer to call it. And there have been, of course, more and more Jewish homes built there, which the UN and others have declared to be illegal. Israel says it is legal as an occupying power in the interim work towards some settlement. In December 2016, the UN Security Council actually laid the blame for the failure to resolve the Arab-Israeli conflict on the establishment of settlements in the Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem, said that these had no legal validity, constituted a flagrant violation under international law, and a major obstacle to the vision of two states living side by side in peace and security within internationally recognized borders. So Israel's building of settlements is one of the main things which is used against Israel. There are some aspects of Israel's policy there which I do find somewhat uncomfortable. Nevertheless, as far as Israel is concerned, it has a right to build in these places. Talk about settlements, I'm not talking about a few caravans on the top of a hill. Basically, you're talking about towns, quite large towns. Some 176,000 people living in the area of Jerusalem, which is over the Green Line. That's in basically the West Bank area. Towns around Gush Etzion, which is to the south of Jerusalem, 49,000. Modi'in, 65,000. Male Adumim, 35,500. Ariel, 18,000. Quite large towns. All of these places, total, including Jerusalem, is 564,500 people, give or take a few. So you've got a large number of people living there. One of the demands of the Palestinians is that all of those should go. Israel says no way. So you have another point in which there is apparently an impasse. The big thing which is used in anti-Israel propaganda today is, of course, this place, the wall, which the security barrier. And if you go to any anti-Israel meetings, you'll hear talk about Israel as an apartheid state, which has separated the Palestinians from the Jews and built a wall so that they can't get to cross the wall. The wall is very unfortunate, and it's a sad thing that there has to be a wall there. The primary motivation from Israel's point of view was to stop terrorism. Interestingly, before 2000, between 1993 and 2000, the border was open. Israelis used to go to Ramallah in the West Bank to buy go to the market there because they could buy goods cheaper. Arabs would come into Israel to work. It wasn't Israel's desire actually to separate and have this wall. It's there because of the terrorism. And it does, of course, make life very difficult for the Arabs, and it's something which is regrettable, but it's not Israel's desire to have it there. Israel would much rather live at peace and be able to dismantle this wall. Not a wall all the way, some parts of it are just a fence, but it's a barrier to keep Israel safe from terrorism. Israel also has a concern to the north, which is the Lebanon. Lebanon is just about there. Can't see it very well, the border goes somewhere along here. And there's a place called Carmiel, where again we have friends. Yossi Ovadia runs a fellowship in Carmiel, just in the north of Israel. Those areas have been under bombardment from missiles from Hezbollah since Hezbollah took control of the area in the year 2000. In 2006, rocket attacks rained down from Hezbollah into the north of Israel and caused the 2006 war. Again, you saw civilians being killed in Israeli attacks on the missile sites, which brought a lot of bad press for Israel. But remember that Israel was the victim, to begin with, of missiles being fired into its territory and had to defend its own people from those who came to destroy them. Hezbollah now has the capability to rain down thousands of missiles onto Israel, supplied mainly by Iran, and Israel reckons that they have at least 120,000 to 150,000 rockets aimed at Israel, many of them now with much longer distances able to reach right through the land of Israel. Israel has its defense system, the Arrow missile defense, which is actually second to none in its effectiveness. It's an amazing system whereby they're able to shoot down incoming missiles as they come, which, if you think about it, is like hitting a bullet with a bullet. And they have actually defended their land with these missiles, which is the most incredible piece of advanced technology. However, it wouldn't be able to defend against a massive missile launch. If they launched thousands of missiles at once, they would get through. And that's what Israel is particularly concerned about. The other neighbour to the north is Syria, and Syria has been Israel's most implacable foe. Made a peace agreement with Egypt and with Jordan, but not with Syria. Syria wants to have back the area of the Golan Heights, which is there just to the south of Damascus. The UN has actually called on Israel to return the Golan Heights to Syria, and recently Russia has endorsed this claim, also saying that the major oil field which has been discovered on the Golan Heights should be returned to Syria because it's Syrian property. Iran has said that they want to remain in Syria after the settlement, and it has a brigade of troops working in Syria for the liberation, they say, of the Golan to Syria. We all know about the civil war in Syria, which has been the most horrendous event, causing hundreds of thousands of deaths, ruined cities, people displaced, refugees, and most difficult battle, very complex battle between Sunni Muslims, Shiite Muslims, secular, Islamist, with Islamic State adding a new dimension of terror and horror to the situation. You also have the Kurds against the Turks, the Saudis against the Iranians, the West who back the secular moderate rebels against Assad, and Russia that backs Assad. And you've had all these complex forces coming into play upon this country, which has basically devastated and ruined it. But now what is interesting, which we're going to tie up in a moment with prophecy, is that Russia has moved in a big way. And Russia has actually become now the deciding factor in Syria. Along with Iran and with Hezbollah from Lebanon, they have swung the momentum Assad's way. Now we have Russia saying that they want to, up in the north of Syria here, in the government-controlled area, there is a place called Latakia, one called Tartus, two Syrian towns where the Russians have said they want to have a permanent military base and a permanent naval base in Syria. You also have Iranian Revolutionary Guards fighting alongside Russia with Hezbollah on Assad's side. Interestingly, Turkey has just moved into the north, taking control of this area, because they don't want the Kurds who are here to have a border right along their border. So you now have Russia, Turkey, Iran involved in the Syrian conflict. And recently they actually held a peace conference in Astana in Kazakhstan of Russia, Turkey and Iran trying to bring about a peace in Syria. That's kind of interesting for a reason we'll see in a moment, but just bear that in mind: Russia, Iran, Turkey. Israel's not involved because Israel, as far as they're concerned, this is an internal problem of Syria. They do have two red lines. One is that they don't want to have terrorists working on their borders, trying to bring back the Golan into Syrian control. And the second one is they don't want Iran stationing troops near its borders and supplying weapons of mass destruction and missiles to Hezbollah. One of the prophecies in the Bible tells us that Damascus will cease from being a city, it will be a ruinous heap. Isaiah 17 verse 1. In fact, that picture, I'm not sure it is Damascus, it's probably one of the other cities of Syria. Aleppo, Homs and other places which have become virtual ruins. The centre of Damascus has not been devastated, though suburbs of Damascus have been ruined. But in December 2016, Israel carried out 2 targeted attacks, causing massive explosions at the military facility near Damascus, a place called Mezeh. Avigdor Lieberman, who is the Israeli foreign minister, said that this was to prevent weapons of mass destruction being shipped from Iran to Hezbollah through Damascus. And Israel has made attacks inside Syria on convoys on their way to Lebanon with arms imported from Iran to be used by Hezbollah. And in fact, yesterday there was a report of an Israeli attack into Syria with a response from Syria, and Israeli anti-missiles were fired on missiles coming from Syria into Israel. So this is pretty up to date with what's happening. It's part of the ongoing issue. And behind all of this, as far as Israel is concerned, is this place, Iran. Netanyahu was once asked, what is Israel's problem? And he said, Iran, Iran, Iran. Iran is made no secret of its desire to destroy Israel. It says within 10 years Israel will be destroyed. Iran is accused of trying to work on a nuclear program. It's threatened to attack Israel and to destroy it within 10 years. Israel has also said it will attack and destroy Iran's nuclear program militarily. Hasn't been able to do that, and it hasn't done that so far because Iran made a peace agreement or an agreement to stop its nuclear program, which Israel says is completely bogus, and it believes that Iran is still working on a nuclear program, probably in conjunction with North Korea, and is working on missiles which are capable of reaching Israel and attacking Israel. Netanyahu recently went to Moscow and asked Putin not to allow Iran to have its forces stationed in Syria. Now, I said Iran has missiles capable of reaching Israel. Some of those missiles have got written on them in Persian, for the destruction of the Zionist state. So Iran has made it very clear that its goal is to destroy Israel. Some of those missiles could be loaded with a nuclear device, and it's a reminder of the danger which Israel faces from this country to the north. Russia is heavily involved with Iran, and Russia has recently supplied Iran with this missile, which is the S-300, which is a very advanced missile capable of knocking out any aircraft flying towards Iran or any missile flying towards Iran, which means that now Israel actually could not mount a military attack on Iran's nuclear weapons because this missile would take them out long before they got anywhere near Iran. Amir Tsarfati, who's a Messianic Jew who believes in the prophecies, says that all these developments are pushing the world towards the fulfillment of the prophecy of Ezekiel 38, the war of Gog and Magog. So is it? Well, we shall see. Ezekiel 38 says, Now the word of the Lord came to me, saying, Son of man, set your face against Gog of the land of Magog, the prince of Rosh, Meshech and Tubal. Prophesy against him and say, Thus says the Lord God, Behold, I am against you, O Gog, the prince of Rosh, Meshech and Tubal. Persia, Ethiopia and Libya are with them, all of them with shield and helmet, Gomer and all its troops, the house of Togarmah, from the far north and all its troops, many people are with you. If you look in Ezekiel 38, this prophecy is something which is located in time, at the time after Israel is gathered from the nations. So it's located also with the end times. It's very clearly about the last days, and it's a prophecy which will lead up to further events dealing with the end of days. It deals with Rosh, Meshech and Tubal, the prince of Rosh, Nissi Rosh, prince of Rosh, which could mean the prince of Russia, or it could mean the chief prince. Whatever it means, it's a country which is to the far north. If you go to the far north of Israel, you get to Russia. and you have a great power which leads an alliance of nations which includes Persia, which is modern Iran, Togarmah, which is Turkey, and some other countries there, Kush and Put, which is Ethiopia and Libya, which will join in this alliance to come against Israel in the latter days. Are we leading up to that? It's quite possible. How long? I don't know. But you're seeing things are happening today which are bringing together these nations into Syria. You're seeing that these nations have... Russia actually doesn't have at the present time an aggressive agenda towards Israel, but Persia certainly does. Turkey does as well. And you can see that these countries are assembling on the borders of Israel. If there should develop some kind of a conflict in which Israel attacks, or Hezbollah attacks and Israel then attacks back against Hezbollah, which they said they would do, to the extent of possibly wiping out the whole infrastructure of Lebanon, including its electricity and its stuff, then that could prompt a countermeasure of an attack on Israel from the north from these countries. We're living in dangerous times. We're living in times, I believe, which are pointing us towards the fulfillment of these prophecies of the Bible, and which we should bear account of as we consider these things. In the book of Joel it says, "Behold, in those days I will gather, at that time I may bring back the captives of Judah and Jerusalem. I will also gather all nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat. I will enter into judgment with them there on account of my people, my heritage Israel, whom they've scattered among the nations. They've also divided up my land." Nations trying to divide up the land, having scattered Israel, but now Israel back in the land and about to be gathered again to battle against Jerusalem. Is this going to happen? Well, if you believe the Bible, it is. Is it the end of the story? No. Actually, God has other ideas. This is a map of the dimensions of the land according to the prophecy of Ezekiel in the millennial kingdom, when according to this prophecy Israel will have all that land and dwell at peace in the midst of the nations.